Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have back on the show, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds? Thanks for having me back, Trevor.
Of course, as if it would be so hard to rope you back into doing this show. I did have the last time I recorded one of these, it was with Jazz though, for our Patreon early access episode, and it's the first time I'd recorded with Jazz in like quite some time, so that was a nice little treat. We'll have to get her back on one of the regular shows very soon.
I was like, man, I really wish I could have gotten in on that because that's a fun one.
Yeah,
that was a fun conversation you guys had about Halloween outfits and Halloween in general.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the episode since I myself am a Patreon supporter, which you can be too at $1.
Yeah, there you go.
So go check that out. It's a really, really fun episode. It's great. Like, Jazz is just such a like, I'm gonna say this and I don't mean it in like the wrong way, but it's such a breath of fresh air to have her on anything.
Yeah,
because she just has such a completely different perspective. Her day-to-day like life and background and everything about her is just so different from you and I
from the four white guys, the
four white dudes,
that do other things on the channel. Agreed. It was lovely having her, and I very much.
I didn't really want to make it like a gender thing, but like because she herself is just like a phenomenal person and a phenomenal talent. That we just.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it was more a jab at just the fact that like the four of us do have a lot of very similar experiences in that we're talking about the games we're playing and the movies we're playing, which isn't necessarily Jazz's kind of like realm. So and we didn't talk about it necessarily so much on that, but like when she and I were just catching up beforehand, like talking about some of her tabletop stuff that she's been up to with especially with her new job and stuff. Like, it's a different realm of nerdity that was fun to kind of get a glimpse into. So yeah, it'd be great to have her back on here, or because she's nerdy about things that I'm not nerdy about, like sports, she and you can like nerd out about some of that stuff and I'll just be like, yep, you guys have fun.
What podcast were we on where we just went off about hockey for a while?
I mean, it was one of these, I think, from like a year plus ago. But
man, that was like, no, that's I think out of everybody on the site, she and I probably have like the most unique Venn diagram kind of crossovers that like we don't share with anybody else. Like, I know we share tabletop gaming with Frank, but like she and I are like really into sports, really into. She's super into mascots, which I'm not too into, but I think is just awesome.
Yeah.
When she ranked, like, that's still one of her most popular articles, like the ranking of mascots.
Yep.
So
NHL mascots. And yeah, we talked about that a little bit. She's like, she keeps waiting for the Seattle Kraken to get their mascot, assigned so she can update that article. Anyway, enough about that. Today, Cam and I are going to be talking about a bevy of games we've been playing and beating. On my side of things, I played Chicory, A Colorful Tale, the Life is Strange True Colors DLC Wavelengths, and then I promised last week that I would talk about Heavensward next time Cameron's on the show, because I did finish the first expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm early days on Stormblood now, so we'll talk a little bit about Heavensward as well. And then Cameron finished up Deathloop finally, which I had finished a little while ago, so we can talk about that one at length. And Cameron has also been checking out all that new hotness with New World. We will be discussing that game and the colonization overtones that it may or may not include, and all that stuff. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like our wonderful Patreon producers do, Pam Larson, Sherry Starkey, and Teresa Wilkinson. Like Cam mentioned earlier, if you support us at $1 or above, you get bonus access to an early episode that goes up every month before it goes out live to the public a month later. And this month's early access episode that went up live September 30th is me and Jazz talking about our favorite Halloween memories and costumes and candy and stuff like that. And that will go live to everybody appropriately on Halloween. If you don't want to support us, no big deal. Let's kick it off, Cam, with you. I want to hear about New World first. That's the game I've been seeing kind of all over the internet this last week. I'd seen a little bit of it for like back when it was in beta and stuff. But our friends like Lauren and Joey have like a new channel in their Discord that was that I originally was brought into back in the Final Fantasy 14 and Fortnite days a few years ago. So I see them playing New World a lot. You mentioned before we started recording that you're playing it. So yeah, tell me a little bit about New World.
Oh, the reason for anybody who's watching you, if you looked at my screen, you were probably seeing, I pulled up my Steam menu. I wanted to see how many hours I'd put into it. Kind of give an kind of look at it. Now, I am somebody who is like very hesitant about New World since its announcement, its debut trailer at E3, I want to say 3 years ago. It had a big trailer, and immediately I, like many others out there, was extremely thrown off by the conquistador colonialist vibe that the game seemed to have. Which is was extremely concerning leading up to the game's launch. That's really like where I was coming from on it. Was this is like, of course, tone deaf Jeff Bezos and like Amazon gaming would be like our
I'm sure
big
Jeff
MMO
Bezos
project.
is like very hands on with the development.
He not hands on, but he has been promoting it pretty heavily, like where he's been going. He's talking because he's proud that Amazon has an MMO game, and it's been very successful so far. So like he has been touting that around, I guess, it's like billionaires, MMOs, and spaceships. Rocket ships. It can't go to space, so eat shit, Jeff Bezos. It's so that was a big concern of mine leading up to its game's launch. My brother-in-law got in on an early beta build of it, and he kind of came back and I watched some of his gameplay, and like I saw kind of like where they were going with it, and I was like, well, I'll hold off and like my criticisms and whatnot until I see more of the game. And then launch came around and a bunch of friends of ours are playing it. You mentioned Lauren, Joey, Harv is playing it. They're playing on like East Coast servers, which just like no. I like to have my local time clock to actually say my local time.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side of that is
I feel like you'll be screwed in a couple months when daylight savings switches again. But
yeah, that's true. Stupid concept. Anyway, we're not going to get into that because I have a whole spiel that Trevor's listened to more than once. But yeah, so when it comes to like New World and what it's done, I Mike played it. Andy Cortez has been playing it. Like Kevin Coelho from Kind of Funny has been playing it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm seeing what they're doing. I'm seeing what this game is like, and and I realized that one of the lead designers at the studio who worked on the game is a carryover from an older MMO called WildStar, which was a really cool concept and idea and executed pretty okay-ish. But what really drove that game was its like really unique combat that New World has like really picked up and is doing. And it's been really, really excellent as far as like the combat goes. There's some things that I wish were different. It's not as reactive as I would like it to be. Unfortunately, things are still going at like that quote unquote MMO pace of actions take time. And so you're you have to kind of like do a predictive measure about certain things and how your moves you're using. But it's very unique. It's very cool. I will say this, for people who are like, oh, so maybe, I want to pick it up. And it's like, let me put it this way. If you like the mini games in Red Dead Redemption 2, where you legitimately took the time to actually do the thing, you might be interested in how gathering works in this game. Gathering is a big part of it. Something that's unique about the game is that there's no direct vendors. There's no you don't buy anything from vendors outside of a like very specific group of people who are vendors who are like covenant, or sorry, not covenant, but are faction faction vendors. But outside of that, like, you don't buy food or weapons or armor or anything from like an armor or weaponsmith, because it's very much a you have to do things yourself, because you are boots on the ground here. You're like, so the premise of New World and the connotations that lie in that statement, and a lot of concerns that people had about between the armor and setting and time period that it seems to take place in, is it gives heavy emphasis on colonialist, colonial era England and Spain and France and a lot of things like that. So there's a lot of inspiration from history as far as style and architecture go, but as far as people's concerned, so New World is not actually like North America and like the Western hemisphere. It's not Western hemisphere. That doesn't make sense? Hemisphere. Oh, it is? Yeah, because it's okay, yeah. Divided, okay, yeah. It's not the Western hemisphere. It's not like the American continents. New World is because they specifically show you on a map as like at the beginning of the game. That's already like there and discovered and whatnot. Like that's already on a map. You're actually going into what you could probably call the Bermuda Triangle. And it's not that you're that this is a colonial thing. It's actually that there is a permanent, like there is a storm that surrounds this island. That any ship that gets near it gets wrecked. And so you end up like through circumstances that start at the beginning of the game, you end up in this place. And it's not like you're settling it like for the intention of population and like colonialism and like colonizing the place. It's you're doing what you have to survive there. So like settlements aren't like for God and our homeland, we've claimed this for us. It's like, this is a really
brutal... We need shelter, there's rain.
Yeah, we need shelter, there's rain. And what's happened is, it is a place where people can't die. When you die, one of two, like, because everybody pretty much dies on their way in. And when you die, one of two things happens. Either you are, depending on what faction you go with, they have different kind of ideas of what's going on. There's the Syndicate that is trying to scientifically explain what's happened. But they believe that they've been quote unquote chosen by some greater thing. You have the Marauders who believe that like it's a gift that they've been given, and they should be using this gift to perfect their like the idea of conquest and battle and whatnot. So little colonial stuff there. And then there's the Covenant, which is basically like there's clearly a spark of life, of humanity, and we need to cherish that spark and make sure that we protect it. And essentially, we need to take up a crusade to purge the corruption of the land in order to basically, free us from the situation that we're in. And so like there's different factions and they're all vying for control, but they also have a pact, which is all three are wanting to fight the corruption. And the corruption is essentially when somebody dies and they don't come back to life with their soul, basically. They die and they come back essentially as a zombie. There's a specific energy or creature or like very eldritch like thing going on where the dead are rising, and so like the place is just littered with zombies. And it like on that aspect, it's pretty like that aspect of it's pretty neat. And then you find out that this is part of a perpetual thing that has just continued to happen. And the settlements that are currently there right now are not the first ones. This has been happening for a very long time. And people like, it's just a continuous cycle of, because you're running around and you like the places where the creatures are that you're fighting, they're in old settlements that have been like run down and ruined. Like there's entire orchards and farms and all sorts of stuff that people have been trying to make a life here and deal with their circumstances. But every time you die, you risk the chance of becoming corrupted. And and sometimes the corruption happens outside of you dying. Like, you can slowly become corrupted otherwise. So there's this entire, it really is more of a survivalist issue than the idea of we're claiming this for God and country, etc. Like whatever ideas people had coming here aren't there anymore, because there's no help coming from the outside. We have to do it all on our own. And your character is somebody who, like, literally was just part of an expedition, and the kind of, like, mascot of the game, the conquistador looking guy, he's just he's a captain of the ship that you're on when you're going, like, through this, and, like, some events happen, and it's pretty interesting. There is something very interesting about it, but really what keeps this thing going is that there's a lot to do. It does the thing that most games do at their end game, which is, hey, you have all the ability to go around and do a bunch of stuff. And they're all, like, daily stuff that you can keep on repeatedly doing. But they put that at the beginning. So, like, gathering is, you are, at the beginning of the game, part of the instructional quest, like, your first quest line is you are given tools. You can do everything. You do not have to select, well, I'm going to be a carpenter. I'm going to be a blacksmith. You can be everything, and you don't have to, like, switch to anything. It's just like you go up to a resource, or you go up to a crafting station, and you do it. And it's just straightforward. And so it really builds off of the idea, like, you can do everything. But, like, part of it is, like, the kind of tools you're using. I didn't level up my logging because logging took too long with flint tools. I eventually built myself a set of iron tools, and now I'm going back at it. And I'm really digging it because it's doing a lot with, from day one, they have player housing. There's a lot of aspects about this game that they are getting right. The one thing I will say that I would definitely put up there as being, like, the biggest drawback of this game is that the enemies are all pretty much one note. They're all corrupted, or they're creatures of the wild, and that's it. Like, it's pretty, like, I'm currently level 17, almost 18. I've put in 17 hours into the game, almost 18 hours into the game, and it is just kind of like the fighting in the game is really cool when it's working well. When it's not working well, or how do I put this? So the game is action based. So you actually, every time you swing your sword, you have to click the button to swing your sword. One thing that they do that's really awesome is ranged combat is skill based, shot based. So, like, you have to aim your shots and aim and, like, hit them. If you miss, like, you don't miss because RNG rolled a dice, rolled a dice algorithm in the background, and so, oh, you swung and you missed that time. It's you, like, if you headshot him, you do the headshot damage. It's great. It's awesome and reactive like that, but I wish there was just different kinds of enemies to be fighting. PvP is a big aspect of this game. Just from the offset, tomorrow I'm taking part in a war for the territory that I'm currently in, between the Covenant and the Marauders. So, like, from, like, day one, you're basically like, oh, when you join one of these factions, by the way, they're at war with each other. And they will declare these small wars, skirmishes for territory. And at the same time, PvP is unlocked super early. So you can go out, and there's actual quests that you can't access from your faction unless you are flagged for PvP. Which is a nightmare sometimes, because you're trying to do your PvP quests, but you don't want a PvP. And so, like, but it's nice that they give you options for that. Another thing is, like, you're not denied, like, progression, because you can, as soon as you finish your non-PvP, like, your PvE quests, you go back and you can immediately pick up more of them. And they are kind of like, auto-generated, same basic stuff. Go there, kill something, gather the resource that's there, whether it's, items or, like, drops from the enemies. It's super straightforward that way. But I'm already kind of getting MMO fatigue from a lot of the quest stuff. I haven't been playing with anybody, and I think that's definitely a massive part of it, is that I'm not playing with friends right now. And so I think that's part of it. Like, there's not a strong story. The lore's interesting, but what's really interesting about the lore is that it takes a lot of people's accounts. So everything you find is a journal like piece from somebody else's journal, and you piece things together that way. And so there's no like there's very little documentation that you pick up that is from like a like analysis or perspective, because these are things being written by people at the time that they're living. And a lot of times some of the really like there's some really sad stuff. Like there is some really sad stuff in there on like some of the farms, like farm places. And like there's a one of your early on quests is, hey, we need you to go through this area and kind of clear it out to help out with like, you know, potential resettlement there maybe someday. And part of it is like what happened there is their corruption got into the wife, and the husband tried to take care of her and like keep her, and like didn't work out, like basic zombie stuff. So it's like that side of it is interesting because there's a lot of like interesting stories, like especially when you get to stuff where it's like you're finding like I stumbled into the tomb of a king who clearly like established some sort of kingdom here, but it has long since fallen away, and there's no record of it outside of a couple of things, which is essentially them talking about like the account of a scribe saying like the king is fallen, we've buried him, we are in the tomb because this is the last safe place on the island, the corrupted have overrun everything else. It's a whole thing, and it, like that aspect of it, I'm like, that's really cool. And then I got my head smashed in by a golem that ambushed me because it spawned right behind me. I came in after some people had already cleared it out, and I was like, oh, this is an empty chamber? So that aspect of things are of classic MMO stuff is there. It's cool. Like there's a lot of really, really cool things, but I think what it really comes down to is this is not a game necessarily about colonialism, but it does unfortunately carry a lot of those aspects from it, from its original premise, and like from, because they clearly pivoted after people's reaction to the trailer. Like they even mentioned in its development that they have brought in like they brought in a lot of consultation to make sure that they are not creating something that's going to be like historically traumatic to a group of people. They've gone way out of their way to make sure that it doesn't do that, that it doesn't, they're not tapping into like the pains and mistakes of history with colonialism. And I think that it's actually benefited the game because this, like I mentioned earlier, you mentioned it yourself, like this is like, oh, it's raining, we need shelter. That's why these towns exist. We need shelter. We need to band together to survive in this place. And it is not a, oh, go take care. Like there are no quote unquote indigenous people here. Everybody who is like a human type enemy is from somewhere else. They were also on their way here. Like this place doesn't have natural born citizens of any indigenous peoples. And so there's an aspect of that. It's like, okay, so this is clearly like a cursed land. And it, like people have tried to live here before, it's failed. You're stuck. Like you don't have another option. Like there are no ships to get you away from here. Because any ship goes out far enough, gets hit by this storm that then destroys everything. And like you have a greater opportunity of becoming corrupted. So it's that aspect of it that I super enjoy. But like, there's just not a lot of diversity, unfortunately.
What's the what's the gameplay model of this one? It's obviously MMO. Is it a like you bought the game and there's a monthly fee?
Nope.
To no? It's just
it's $40. You buy in and that's it.
Okay. And then is there like in-game economies where you can do like microtransactions and stuff like that? Then I'm trying to figure out how Amazon continues to make money on this. Then.
Yeah, it is definitely utilizing in-game cosmetics. Right now, if you're watching Twitch streamers who are streaming the game, they will actually... they will actually, like, you can get drops using the Twitch drop system. Mm-hmm. And there are bluish-purple weapons skins. So no matter what you do, what weapon you pick up, you can just set its skin to being whatever you have unlocked. Which is nice on that aspect of it, because you don't have like these like dyes in Final Fantasy XIV, for example. Mm-hmm. Like you use them and then it's gone, and you have to buy more of them. And like you can buy some of the colors, like the specific colors, like white and black, from the store. but you get 10 pots of that for like X amount of dollars. You don't get like it unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what this does, is it does give you like an unlocking feature to that. So that's nice. They're probably going to flood it with a ton of stuff, and that's like, it is what it is. I don't know how long I'm going to be in on this game, just because this game is fun, but I'm already getting to the part where like, okay, now it's the grind. And the grind is not as rewarding as I would like it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said the story is kind of lacking. Is there like a main quest line that you're like progressing through? Okay. And it's just, you're just kind of getting tired of like, it's too samey in that main quest line?
Yeah, because especially since the next part I have to do, my brother-in-law told me you basically do a bunch of fetch quests, which is the most annoying crap in the world. And it's done to build a staff so that you can do the dungeon. And it's like, okay, so that's like, and so like the entire point of this game is that you're just trying to like clear the corruption from this land. And that's it. And that's super generic.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that this game will live and die is based off of the fact, like the companies are the guilds in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And whether this game lives or dies is going to be based off of whether or not these companies can create actual like social circles that will be endearing to, oh hey, like, and here's the thing, like, it's cool that there's an aspect of actually taking over places. That's awesome. The factions themselves are unique because there's no good guys or bad guys. Everybody's kind of like, how do I put it? Everybody definitely has their like people that you're gonna like and get along with, and every faction has somebody who's an asshole.
Mm-hmm. What are the benefits and the perks of taking over a territory or something like that? Because I've heard you mention that, and then I've heard Lauren and them talking about it too.
So there is a faction takeover, which takes over a territory, like larger territory. And then there is company takeover, which is about towns and hamlets. So every settlement starts off as a hamlet, and the more you invest into it with gold, the more, like, the better stuff is in the town. So, like, every station has a tiered, like, version of it. So you have, like, tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, or 5. Or maybe not up to 5. I think it might only go up to 4. No, I think it goes up to 5 now I think about it. But yeah, like, there are different aspects. So you'll go to a settlement, and it has, you know, like all this top tier stuff, so you can craft whatever you need to there, and you don't have to worry about it not being a higher enough tier for you to craft it. And there are no NPC company controlled towns. Now, what the companies get out of that is that there are taxes. There are taxes every time you go to craft something, every time you go to purchase something from one of the actual, like, there's the trading post, which is what everybody has access to, and it's flooded with all sorts of stuff. And, that, you know, is usually gear that people don't want, so they're selling it instead. And because everybody has access to it, and it's one of the only ways that you can make money out of this game, in its economy, it's flooded with stuff which drives down prices. So, you know, you're not punished for buying gear rather than going out and finding it yourself, because gear can be hard to find sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of stuff with that, and it's really, really cool.
So like, if you take over a territory, if your faction takes over a territory, do you get your faction gets the taxes from that? I'm just trying to figure out what the benefits of the war idea and the factions fighting each other are. Like, what happens when your team wins?
So the faction, I don't know all the specifics about faction, like, having control over a place. The companies themselves are made up of players. Factions are kind of like the blanket NPC controlled stuff. But there are wars scheduled to deal with, like, for things to go with that. And usually a war will be set up for one of two ways. Either it's an invasion by the corrupted. And so the corrupted are an actual faction that they can take over areas.
Mm-hmm.
And they make it so there's more monsters there. There's less resources, stuff like that. So, like, faction wise, I'm not sure what the exact benefits are, but I know there are benefits tied to it.
Okay.
I just am not too. There is actually there. I can actually think of one. There is a certain crafting station, but it's actually not a crafting station. It's depot distribution for items. So in the town that I'm in right now, that I'm nearby, it's controlled by my faction in that territory. So I can go up to this ore cart and basically get free iron ore.
Okay.
In the town that I started off in, Everfall, I think is what it's called. They you go up and they give you free skins to turn into leather.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's there's that advantage to it. And I think the more that you control, the more areas you can just bounce between different settlements and get free stuff.
Gotcha.
So
cool.
Yeah. And I mean, that's worthwhile because iron's hard to find because so many people are mining it.
Yeah.
And so getting free, a free 30 iron, great. I can go make some ingots. I can level that up because I want to be able to level all this stuff up so that I can make steel, so that I can eventually make steel tools and make it easier for me to gather.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, you mentioned you're fighting in a war tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the benefit of winning if you win that war or if you lose that war? What's the cost? So cool.
The cost is whether or not I'm going to have to deal with marauders in my settlement more.
Gotcha.
And I don't want that.
So you're in the Covenant?
I'm in the Covenant, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on New World before we move on to the next game?
Yeah, I will say I don't know how long-term the success of this game will be, but it is nice seeing somebody put out a new MMO.
It definitely
used to be that we...
Yeah, I was just going to say, it definitely seems to... MMOs seem to live and die by their player base, obviously, and a lot of that these days comes in with how much content is there and how quickly can new content be added to keep players invested. So you don't have people coming in quickly, being oh my god, this game's the coolest thing, and then a month in everybody's done everything and there's nothing new for another 3 or 4 months. I remember it obviously weathered the storm, but I remember when Apex was running into people were there's nothing new, so why keep coming back to this and stuff like that.
Well, for that, especially because Fortnite is your competitor and Fortnite's constantly putting out content.
Yeah.
That's a whole part of that's a whole industry issue. With MMOs in particular, usually it's the end game stuff that there's very little to do. Everything's on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that are usually on the back end are at the end of this. And so I'm super curious about what's going to happen with this game towards end game. I don't know anybody who's in the max level yet, which is really cool. And a big part of that is there's just so much to do. Leveling up your main level is not always the how do I put this? The satisfaction of improving something is consistent and constant with the effort that you put into it, and it's extremely rewarding. That being said,
if you're just keeping to fight zombies over and over again, that's not as satisfying and rewarding if you need to if that's the grind compared to let me go log some stuff or
exactly.
Yeah.
Because when I get my logging up to level 25, I'm going to be able to take down, or level 50, I can take down mature trees, and I'll have new lumber to experiment with and do things with.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole big part of it.
Yeah.
Is that aspect of that Minecraft esque aspect of crafting in this game is excellent.
I mean, you're talking to somebody who got my lumber, my mining, my goldsmith all up over level 50, I think, before I got my black mage up to level 50 in Final Fantasy 14. So I can appreciate the hey, I'm gonna take a break from the main stuff and do this fun stuff a little bit just to see those numbers tick up more, or just to feel like I'm doing something out there. So I can appreciate that. It's definitely. I will be curious to see the legs on a game like this, because the other example I was thinking of kind of hit or miss rockiness in terms of keeping audience and stuff has been the Destiny games, of course. It feels like those always come out really strong, and then there's a lull and they lose a lot of players, and then they have to bring people back with a new expansion or a big thing, and they're better at it now with the more consistent seasons and stuff. But I'll be curious to see kind of what the post-launch plans for New World end up being, and how long these record-breaking numbers on concurrent players and stuff last before the next new thing comes along and kind of starts pulling people away. Well, cool. So pivoting over into one of mine, I'm going to talk a little bit about Chicory, A Colorful Tale. Are you familiar with this game at all, Cam?
No, not really.
So it's an indie game by it's a handful of like individuals who made it, but it was published by Finji, who are the people who also published games like Night in the Woods. Overland is another one of theirs that I really enjoyed.
Okay, yeah, no, I know the studio. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chicory, A Colorful Tale is a game where there is a wielder who basically, there's like one wielder in the world who the wielder holds the magical paintbrush that can add color into the world. And through kind of the beginning of the game events, all of the color in the world gets like washed away. And your character, who is like a janitor for the wielder, ends up basically inheriting the brush and becoming the new wielder. And because color is gone from the world, you are tasked with like bringing color back in. And in doing so, you have to kind of, and there's also similar, I guess, to New World, I guess, there's a corruption that's also going on in this world that may have been responsible for like all of the color being wiped out. So basically, like, you're going through a very, I would say, Zelda Link to the Past style overworld map where it's like every screen has stuff in it for you to do, and everything's in black and white, and every screen basically you can go in and like color in items on the map. Like you have the brush as kind of a cursor, and you can either like paint by like holding L2 and kind of like move the cursor around. If you like double tap L2, it'll do like a big old splotch of paint. If you hold it, it'll like do the splotch, and then it'll kind of like spread out into a fill pattern. You eventually pick up like new brush techniques and stuff. Like by the end of the game, I had a fill that would just automatically like I would tap it into an area and it would do the fill function of anything. And each area basically has like a few preset colors. So you don't have like a full spectrum of colors that you're painting into everything, but even that, like eventually you can kind of unlock like a custom color palette where you can use the colors that are like built into that particular screen, or you can dip into your custom palette. And so like I would, if I'm in like the ocean area that's like basically 4 different shades of blue, but I have my custom color palette, I could like throw drops of red or purple in there or stuff like that, and just add extra flavor to it. It's basically a big coloring book is kind of the game. And you're going through, and you're like, people will kind of like, one of the first people I encountered was like, hey, all the color's gone from my house, but you're the wielder, can you add color back into my house? And I start adding colors in, and they're like, I don't really like that, can you like make it a more even blend of colors? And so it was like, oh, you want an even blend of colors? So if I do a little bit of like color A, and then a little bit of color B, and then a little bit of color C, and kind of keep them like evenly matched, I talk to them and they're like, that's great, thank you. And then they would give me like a little reward. And the rewards are like either the kind of like extra brush styles that I kind of mentioned earlier, or there's like a lot of cosmetic like costume stuff where you basically have like a headpiece that you can wear, or like an outfit that you can wear, and they'll give you just like a ton of those kinds of things. And you'll also find those like scattered around in like little gifts that are either like there on the map and you have to kind of solve like a little puzzle to get to it, or there'll be like hidden things and you have to like dab paint on it to make it reveal itself or something like that.
I have to say, so this is coming from the Night in the Woods developer, right?
It's not the developer; it's the publisher. Finji is the publisher, so it's like the publishing studio that did Night in the Woods also did this game. The developer of this game is a handful of names. It's like Dan and so and so and so and so and so. It's like 6 names, I think, is basically like who is like credited in kind of the opening of the game. But yeah, like Finji. I always think of when I went to PAX South in 2016, Andy Cortez, now of Kind of Funny, then about to be of Rooster Teeth, because this was like right before he started working at Rooster Teeth, he introduced me to them when we walked by their booth and was like, I love these guys' art style. Like, Like all the games they work on or they kind of publish have like really cool, interesting art styles. And this was like before Night in the Woods came out. I think they had like some Overland stuff. I think they're also, at least they were at one point, I think they were publishing Tunic, which is the little fox Zelda like game. So yeah, they just like they seem to be drawn to like cool, interesting art styles. But yeah, they're not the actual developers on this. Like they had some involvement, I'm sure, but yeah, this was more of a super indie team. And yeah, it's just it's this. As I was thinking about it, I was like, this is more Zelda-like for me than Breath of the Wild was, because I mean it is very much like a Link to the Past overworld map. You're like, each chapter of the game, you're kind of going into a dungeon, and the dungeons aren't Zelda dungeons so much as the dungeons are boss fights, and they're the only like fights in the game. Like there's no enemies in the map. You're just kind of like solving puzzles and traversing the world. But you go into these corruption trees to try and like clear the corruption, and that's where you get like story development and character development. That it also has a very Celeste-like story in that like this is all about dealing with a lot of these characters' insecurities and what it means to be the wielder in this world, and what it has meant for your character to have looked up to the wielder and suddenly you are the wielder and you don't feel worthy of it because you got it through happenstance. And as you kind of make friends with the prior wielder, who is the titular Chicory, she kind of like starts sharing her vulnerabilities of like her whole life was like built up to trying to be the wielder, and was that satisfying? And once she was the wielder, was she ready for it? And those kinds of things. And there's like a long lineage of like master and apprentice. So you meet some of the other prior wielders throughout the game, and they kind of have their own little stories that flesh out. But when you go into these boss fights, the game suddenly turns into, are you familiar with the game Just Shapes and Beats?
Yes, actually I am.
Because that's the closest thing I could think of, is basically like you're in those areas. There is basically like the first one out, for example, is like an eyeball, and it's shooting beams of light at you. And if those beams hit you, like you'll take damage. And if you take like enough damage, you fall basically. And like you'll have to like restart that section or something like that. And you have to like avoid them with one thumbstick. You're controlling your character with one stick, and you're controlling the brush with the other. And so you're having to use the brush to attack the enemy while also avoid the enemy stuff. And so the closest analog I have is thinking of like Just Shapes and Beats, where you're just trying to like avoid the stuff that's like flying at you on screen. And I will admittedly say that those are my least favorite element of this game.
Okay.
And if there were not an option to like make yourself invincible, or you can skip the boss fights entirely if you want, I probably would have like put this game down about a third of the way in, because I was just like, wow. all of these boss fights, in my opinion, are 2 to 3 times longer than they should be. Like they are really long, and they're so unlike everything else you're doing throughout the rest of the game that it's just like, I have to learn a whole new skill set of stuff to deal with. And so like finally after like the third, like after dying a bunch to like the third boss in the game, I think it was, like a little thing came up and said, hey, do you want to change the options? You can go into the options and change these settings to, make yourself need more hits before you die. Or you can just kind of like, go to like, I'm invincible basically. And so I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to do that. And then even with that, those fights were like just way too long. Like a lot of it. And some of it is just like the mechanics of a fight. They would do that thing that's like, like a Shadow Link kind of thing from a Zelda game, where it's like, you've got the brush and you're moving the brush, but then there's like a mirror version of the brush that's going to go basically in the complete opposite part of the screen that you're in. And you need to hit the enemy with the mirror part of the brush, which becomes like really convoluted to try and control. And it's like just a real mind mess. So those elements, gameplay wise, I hated. But I appreciate that the game realizes that might not be for everybody, and did not make that a barrier to progressing through the game. Because beyond those, like, I think it's got a really cool, again, Celeste-like story of dealing with like, mental health and personal issues and kind of overcoming adversity in those regards and finding confidence in yourself and dealing with self-doubt and all that stuff. I think there's a lot of like really, really cool themes and stuff that are approached in there. As for the like coloring in the map and stuff, there's some cool, fun puzzles, and there's a lot of like little like, hey, all of the like art of the world has also been removed, so we kind of need you as the new wielder to recreate it. So here's what it used to look like, and now we're going to give you a canvas, and you can basically like do your take on it. And then when you make that, it'll like, they'll be like, great, this looks great, and they'll even do like a little art critique where like they'll specifically mention like, oh, I really liked your use of purple in in this part of the thing, or like, oh, you really left a lot of like blank space in the top half of your canvas. Like the characters kind of comment on some of those things, which is a cool, interesting artistic element to it. And then that picture that you've painted will be hung up somewhere in the world, and you'll be able to like go and see it. And like, be reminded of this thing you made it. So there's like cool little elements like that. Probably my favorite little element is that there's like a time lapse function. And you can, basically like when you beat the game, or I think you can do this probably on command as well. But like, it'll show you the world map, and it'll show you like time lapse of not only like where you uncovered, different screens of the map, but then also it'll give you like the colors that you put into the map. And it will basically like it is recording everything that you've done on this map, all the colors and all the different like lines you've drawn or the places you've filled in. And so it'll just do like a time lapse of like, here's everything that you spent the last 10 hours doing in, a minute time lapse kind of thing. And you just see like all of your colors fill the map up and stuff like that. It's really cool. You eventually, like, as you clear out kind of the bosses, you unlock new abilities for your brush that gives you access to new areas, like a Zelda game or a Metroidvania or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like you can't go in water at the beginning of the game, and you can't even paint on water at the beginning of the game, and it'll kind of like wash away. But by the end, you've like leveled up your brush, and now you can paint on water, you can swim in the water, which will give you like, you can then go into like kind of hidden places or stuff like that. So yeah, lots of like, it is a very interesting idea, and I very much appreciated that they gave me the flexibility to like bypass some of the elements of the game that I just did not like. Because if they did not, like I would have been like, hey, this isn't like, I like this part of the game, but I'm so tired of like this other part of the game. I'm just gonna like I was ready to bounce off a couple times and ultimately push through when I realized, oh, I can turn that off, or I can make myself invincible and just worry about like doing damage to the boss, and I'll stay there and let them do whatever they want. Because like, especially by the end of the game, I was like, if I was having to do this back with like the conditions that the game started me with, there's no way I would have made it through. Like, there's so much stuff being thrown at me on screen, and so many, like, I was like, I would have died there, I would have died there, I would have died there, I would have died there. It was just like, oh god, this would have been like a nightmare trying to play like normal.
I think that this sounds like this is a game that gets pretty complicated at certain points. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really happy that they had some of those accessibility features in there.
Yeah. It's such a weird, I was thinking about this when I finished it yesterday. Cause I was like, oh, this is actually a comparison I think Cameron would maybe appreciate. Is I don't think I felt like a game like this since Death Stranding, where there are elements of this game that I absolutely love and adore. Like in Death Stranding, I loved once I had like access to an area and could like build up like, the slingshots and stuff to like get me back to and deliver things. I love those things, but I absolutely hate the dungeon things. Just like I hate going into an area for the first time in Death Stranding where you don't have access to any of those abilities, and it's just a slow trudge until you reach the next point where you're gonna like open up the map again. Like, yeah, it's such a like or going back to a long conversation we've had over many conversations really about like Final Fantasy 15. It is a very Tale of Two Games kind of game where it's like there's like half of this that's really cool, really fun, really engaging, and then there's half of it I just oh my God, kill me. So I appreciate that the oh my God, kill me version or half this game that they gave me tools around that and tools to work around that. So yeah. Any
No, it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I don't really have any questions about it. It sounds like it's a pretty interesting game. It doesn't really feel like it's up my alley personally, but I think that it does have a lot of aspects to it that are like, it sounds like you did enjoy your time with it. I think that's super cool. I think like, I love, even if, and this is my big point why I oftentimes say like, yeah, it's not really like a game that I think I'd be too interested in. I love that games exist that I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
I'm a boring ass white guy. Like my tastes are basic as fuck. And so when it comes down to that, I love that a game like this exists where it can explore exploring the themes of mental health through the aspect of painting and art is super, super cool. And doing it in an abstract, cool, fantastical way like this sounds awesome. And I'm really, really happy that this game exists. It's just, it's not going to be for me. But I'm really glad that you enjoyed your time with it. But I did hear a lot of like, those things do sound like, it sounds like at certain points of the game, there's so many like systems that introduces as far as like what it's, not systems, different aspects of the painting system, that I can understand why you get frustrated by a lot of that.
I will also highlight that I imagine, like, I thought this a number of times throughout the game, because the control scheme of playing it on a controller is weird, because you are like moving your character around with one set of with like the left thumbstick, and then you're moving the brush cursor around with the right thumbstick. And I imagine that if that was, I'm moving my character around with like WASD on a keyboard, and then like moving the brush cursor around with a mouse, I imagine that would be way easier to manage, and it doesn't work great on a controller. So I think that's another element of it too, is that it might just be a much better. It very much feels like it is designed for a PC kind of experience, and is probably a smoother PC experience there because of that. But I will also say that one of the big champions I saw for this game out there was Janet Garcia. She was out there. I think Deathloop is maybe kind of now in the running with this for Game of the Year for her. I don't know where she's ultimately fallen on it, but like that's definitely like the conversation that Deathloop is kind of like taken in, is like she loves Chicory, and she was the big one I saw championing about. Like I remember seeing it come out, and I bought it at the time when it came out earlier in the year, and this was just like my first time getting around to it finally, and so yeah, it was a very like I was curious to see kind of what she was really loving about it. And I didn't really like sit down and I've not looked at really any of her like analysis on the game or anything like that, but seeing her kind of like shout this out, I was like, okay, I want to check that out. And I do think it's like in its story and its narrative, it is tackling a lot of like really cool, really like good themes that I think should get addressed, and even like a lot of like the side characters and side stories and stuff like that. This is a game, you're saying like fetch quests in New World suck. Like this is a game full of fetch quests. Because it's like you literally go into a town called Dinners at one point, and it's like the whole map is basically like food themed. Your character's name is you're prompted at the beginning of the game, like, what's your favorite food? And whatever you say is your favorite food, that's what your character's name is. So so I went with pasty because Cornish pasty didn't fit here, one of our local eateries in town. And so like the whole time I was like, hey, pasty, like you're the wielder, right? Cool. Can you help us with this thing? But you meet like a couple characters I remember, like turnip, beans. There's like, like everybody, like nobody has like a normal name. Everybody's kind of like named like that. And then the city, like your town that you basically start in is called Luncheon, and then you go to Dinners. There's like I want to say there's like a brunch banquet or something like that. Like it's all like very food themed, or there's also like a lot of like like I think plant kind of themed stuff. There's also like this mechanic where you'll acquire decorations that you could just kind of put down anywhere on the map. There'll be some, like in particular, some screens will be like, hey, I'm trying to throw a party here. Can you help decorate this area? And it'll be like, okay, cool. Like throw down 10 things and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is great. So like leave and then come back and people will show up, and you walk one screen off and you walk back and everybody's there to party. And so it's like a little cool, like the way you kind of like fill in this coloring book in all senses is like really kind of up to you. And that's a really cool like element of the game. But then, yeah, you go into dinners and you go somewhere and they're like, hey, I need a mail carrier. Take these letters and go deliver them. And it'll be like, it'll be like, here's the description of where this thing is. And it'll be like one screen north of this bridge. And so you go to that bridge and you go there. And that just reminded me of one of my other absolute favorite elements of this is there will be phone booths scattered around the map. And every time you go to a phone booth, you're basically, you will call home and your mom will answer the phone and she'll kind of give you a tip of what to do next. And then you'll see like your dad's like paw, because your dad's like a raccoon or something. You're a dog. Your mom's, I think, also a dog, and your dad's like a raccoon. Everything. Also, all the characters are animals. Like Turnip that I mentioned earlier is like a tiny little mouse. So your dad will kind of like have his paw reaching in, and your mom will be like, your dad wants to talk to you, and you know how he is. He will give you a very detailed explanation of what you need to do next. So your mom will give you kind of like the vague hint of like, hey, here's, I think, where you need to go. And if and it'll prompt you and say like, would you like to talk to your dad? And if you say yes, your dad will hop on the phone and be like, okay, so you need to go 2 screens to the right. Then you need to use this ability to go 1 screen up, and then you'll be where you need to be. And so it's like, it is like, it is incredibly like user friendly in that regard as well. Because there was like one point I was like, I don't remember what I was supposed to be doing next anyway. So let me like call my mom and she's like, here's where you're supposed to be going on the map. And I was like, great, cool. I don't need to talk to dad. But then there was one time where I was like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Cause I had missed an area or something like that. And so like having the dad just pop on and be like, here's what you need to do. Go here, then go up, then, go left one more. And then you should be able to use this ability to go down 1 screen and see the person you're going to see. And I was like, perfect. Thanks, Dad. So yeah, it's a lot of fun in just how again, like in both regards, both in like, hey, you can just go into the options and like change some settings around, but then also in this like accessibility option for like, hey, we're going to give you the walkthrough, and it's going to be in the form of phone calls to your parents. And you can get the very basic version of it, or you can get like the here's exactly what you need to do kind of version of it. I really appreciated that. So yeah, that was my time with Chicory, A Colorful Tale. I don't know. I very much enjoyed my time with it. I don't know if, there's been a lot of games this year that I've probably enjoyed more, so I don't know where it'll end up falling in my like top games of the year conversation, but I'm glad I spent time with it. And again, I'm glad that games like this recognize, again, Celeste from like an accessibility perspective is probably like one of the most direct comparisons I can draw to on this game. Is like they realize, hey, these elements aren't going to be for everybody, so let's give a variety on how people can approach this game and do it. So yeah, it's really cool time there. I mentioned it earlier, but let's go back over to you. You just finished Deathloop.
Yes.
So what did you ultimately end up thinking about your time with Deathloop? You had to take some time off with it because you had a controller mishap. So you finally got your controller back. You were finally able to finish the game. What are your thoughts? And if you want to dive into spoilers, we can dive into spoilers. I'm fine with that, but I just want to like make sure we know that this is going to be a spoiler-free or spoiler-filled area, so I can put that in the notes.
Sure. I think I am not going to get too spoilery.
Okay.
But because I think there's so much about Deathloop that is like spoiler-proof in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that there is a lot about it so essentially what Deathloop boils down to, outside of just being like a traversing like first-person shooter game, is it's a social puzzle game in a lot of ways, where you have to use social engineering to make things happen in a specific order and way in order to get people in certain places and have them do certain things. And you also have to discover, hey, where do some of these like visionaries go to during the day, because they're not always hanging out in their base. What's going on with them? And so there's a lot of these social engineering aspects of the game that I really enjoyed. I I just started getting into the meat of that, like, which is that part of the game is very much introduced towards the quote unquote end game.
Mm-hmm.
And it very much is where, like, that's where my controller broke at the time. And so it's like, cool, I've been craving to get back into it so I can try to get this perfect run. Because the premise of Deathloop is you have to kill the visionaries, which is the leaders of the island, all within a day. And so how do you manage that? How do you make that work? And it's been a really fun challenge. It's been fun exploring the island using the kind of time traversing mechanics of the game to do that. And having finally beaten it, I think this is where I think I'm just going to keep it spoiler free for the entire time, unless we decide we want to break into spoilers.
Yeah,
because I really think that there's quote unquote spoilers that they have in the game aren't too interesting. They flesh out some stuff, but at the end of the day, the game is the game.
Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. As I've seen people kind of like start writing their think pieces about that, it has been like from the first trailers of this game, I was not thinking this was going to be a very like spoiler filled kind of game. It was like the game is the selling point of Deathloop, not the story. Like the story's there, and I don't have like major problems with the story. And it does have a couple like, oh, like that's a twist kind of thing that like you uncover
it has
throughout.
Reveals.
Yeah, but it's
I wouldn't say it's much more. It's
like,
they're like information gets revealed over time, and it's like cool. But a lot of that is also part of the puzzle aspect of the game. So.
Yeah, the driving point of this game has always been the arcaneness of it, of like, how is it like Dishonored? It is, figuring out these different things, the open worlds or the sandboxes of each of those areas across each of the different time periods. It's like, that's the far more interesting aspect of this game than the couple of things that are like, oh, that's an interesting reveal. And for me, they were interesting reveals when they came up. And I was like, oh, that's a cool little like twist that now puts certain things in a new light. But like, it didn't, like, I wasn't living or dying based on the story of the game so much as the gameplay of the game.
Yeah, that is so nail on the head on that one. Yeah, like the thing is, I don't want to spoil anything because I think those reveals are rewarding. There are rewards attached to what information you find out. And I think that a big part of that is I'm not going to sit here and spend 20 minutes detailing how I solve this puzzle to get this piece of information that if you haven't played Deathloop, doesn't matter. And even if you have played Deathloop, it's kind of like, okay. Yeah. Like there's no, that's why I said, I don't like the idea of the word of twists being used because nothing's really a twist. It's, oh, this is a reveal. Okay.
Yeah.
And I like that aspect of it. I like I like all the characters. The visionaries are unrelenting in their monstrosities, like their monstrosity of their what they represent and what they indulge in.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also some of the characters have a very profound sense of I guess was like sympathy to them. They are unequivocally monsters. In this situation, like people do reveal, I think, a lot of their true nature. If you were just in this loop over and over again, what would you do with it?
I mean, your character in and of itself, you're murdering people over and over and over again because, like, at the end of the day, if you didn't do everything, like, you still killed all those people, and you're just going to kill them all again tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. It's like, what happens when death is... And the thing about it is, like, because of the anomaly that represents the time loop that you're in, it takes away people's memories. So they don't remember dying the day before because to them that day hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole thing, and I appreciate that they... One thing I will say is I deeply appreciate that they did not spend too much time delving into the timey-wimey theorem stuff. Like, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a mechanism to tell the story, to give you, like, the gameplay that we want to give you. That's what Arcane did with it, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, this doesn't need, like, really, here's the quantum theoretical physics that's behind this time loop idea or whatever. It's just like, hey, these guys figured this thing out in the 60s, and maybe before that, who knows?
There's a lot that goes into that aspect. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that aspect of it, but it also like hits me in a way that it's like, oh yeah, no, because like I had been killing not Alexei, what's his name? He's he is Igor. I've been killing Igor without really too much trouble or too much thought, and the one time I slipped up, all of a sudden he's saying a lot of dialogue that I hadn't heard before, and it's like I feel like Cole not having his Cole, the situation that Cole is in gives an ability of detachment towards the lives of these people, and it is to the benefit of the game, and it's also a little jarring because you are playing this guy who is like, I'm supposed to end this loop, even though this loop is theoretically like not hurting anybody or anything, but like I want it to end. Everybody else wants to stay here and for it to be fine, but no, I'm against it and I'm gonna break it. And he there are reasons and they are revealed, and it's like it does a really good job of pitting one man against an entire island full of people who are against you in a really, really good way.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated a lot of the characters' interactions and relationships. And I don't just mean that with the Visionaries and Colt and Juliana. I mean that with I got to, in a weird way, I voyeuristically got to know some of the NPCs that I was killing every day.
Yeah.
It gets very real. These people have names. They have personalities. They Arcane outdid themselves immensely. With this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's there's a handful of things to jump off there. One, because of your objective in the game, you mentioning that oh, Igor starts saying all these things, the handful of times I really encountered Igor, I pretty much killed him before he got any words out. So I really don't know anything about him as a character because I was trying, I went in with an objective to kill him and I killed him before I learned anything about him.
And you can play the game and you I normally had been that way, but I tripped up once on accident, and all of a sudden this reveal of the personal relationship between Colt and Igor is done. And because of the way that the game starts and sets up, it doesn't have, it doesn't sway it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
You're still there to kill Igor. Especially because you get that sweet, sweet slab upgrade.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved the gameplay. I was a massive proponent for years for Dishonored and Dishonored 2. I shouted from the rooftops that people need to play these games. And luckily some people listened and continued to carry on that call for more people to play these games.
And now a whole new audience is getting to experience them through Game Pass and stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Before we get too far away from it,
hit yet. Yeah. I don't think Game Pass has hit yet, but yeah.
Not for Deathloop, no, but for Dishonored. Yeah, the Dishonored.
Oh, for Dishonored, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this obviously is not on Xbox. This whole PlayStation exclusive thing. But before we get too far away from it, I did want to touch on you mentioning the NPCs, and I do love that some of them have stories, and there's one I think of. So I would always go to the Bay Area thing that has their airplane hangar and stuff, and you go there in the morning and there's this guy tuning up a guitar and he's crap and sucks and whatever. But if you come back to that place throughout the day, by the evening he's out there rocking out and jamming out. But
he's got a crowd of people too, a bunch of people who are normally just around.
Yeah.
If you don't kill them earlier in the day, they're there listening to him play.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
And that was so many times, I got a trophy the first time I ever did it. Because I snuck up behind him and kicked him off the thing, and it's you got a trophy for making someone fall to their death. And he was the first one I'd done that to, and I was like, oops. And then I kind of I did that, and then I kind of made that just my own little tradition when I would go to that part of the map. And so when I didn't do that one day and then came back to that place later, that's when I started seeing how his story evolves throughout the day, and I was like, that's really cool. It's one of those things having played and know Dishonored, like, of course that's what's going to happen. And then there's also just like a handful of things in there of like there's one guy also in that same like map that like you kind of have to like prevent his death, because he will die at the hands of a visionary if you don't like intervene. And intervening is the only way to like open up that guy's shop later in the day or something like that. And so there's cool elements, again, going back to your like social puzzle aspect, that I guarantee I've not seen probably like, you know, half of what that game has to offer, because I just
Did you know that there's an orgy in that game?
I believe it because I've like walked into that orgy room, but I don't think there was ever an orgy going on when I walked into it.
If you don't kill enough people in the morning, when you go back at noon or in the afternoon, I don't recall which one, you can hear the sound of people like talking while they're getting it on. And if you kill enough people, that I don't think that happens, because it didn't happen one time. Maybe I killed the person who instigates it. I don't know. But I love that aspect of it, because I was like, why can't I get into this room? I know that I can get into this room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then I just like heard people in there. I'm like, why are there so many people in there? And then I look around, I'm like, why are there no people outside and around? And it's like, because they all piled into this like little house to have an orgy. And I'm like, that is wild. Like that is crazy. That is trippy, but that is so 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably like another thing that I really, really love about this game is the way that it plays deeply into its 60s aesthetic to the nth degree. As much as Dishonored was like super Victorian, this is super 60s psychedelic stuff all over the place.
All the candy and the pills.
All the candy, the pills, which I loved, because if you, in the morning, you go and you beat up enough of the, if you like destroy enough of the candy machines, there's like more people in the candy shop waiting for the guy to repair them. I think that was the case. Here's the thing. I don't know if things happen for sure, because there's so many dominoes that can fall and change things in this game.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There's a fight between two NPCs where they're one's about to like choking the other to death. That if you don't interrupt, you can just like, literally watch an NPC kill another NPC.
Mm-hmm.
And I like running by them, because they're so distracted with the choking, they don't notice you immediately.
Yeah. And
so it's like, and I'm like, I love running by them, because it's like, haha, it's fun. There's so much about this game that is just so much fun.
Yeah.
And so entertaining. And that's not even talking about the experience you have as Juliana doing the hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Which in and of itself is fun, because it's cat and mouse. It's Cole has his rewind ability, and which is not what you think when you hear I say that. It's because it
is reprise.
Reprise. There you go. Thank you. I'm like, it starts with an R. I can't remember it. It's not a rewind. It's reprise. Thank you. But yeah, so reprise ability makes it fun. But here's the thing: Juliana, just another person, easy to kill. So you have to be careful. But I love getting into firefights. I love setting traps for Colts, and it's a lot of fun. This game just does so much right in so many different ways. I'm not surprised at all that it's Arcane that did it, or that Arcane was successful in what they accomplished, because it's Arcane. They've been doing this since Dishonored 1. They're an awesome studio, and I can't wait to see what they do next.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what the Red Dawn. Is that what their next one is?
I'm not familiar with that.
I think that's the one that got announced at the Xbox E3 thing, because it was the big thing. Like they closed the show for the Xbox E3 showcase. So, and it was like their.
I don't recall. I'll have to go check that out.
Yeah, I think that was what it was. Arcane Redfall. That's what it is.
Redfall.
Yeah,
Redfall.
That's the one where like they're like basically vampire hunters, in like a Texas town or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm so stoked for this. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
So.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so yes. 100% yes. I love it. I love it. I'm looking at it right now, and it's like perfect. Absolutely perfect. I loved it. I love the trailer for it. Just like small town. It's like I love the idea of it, because it's essentially just like the Not enough people know about the Lost Boys, man. Not enough people know about Lost Boys.
Not enough people of our generation know about the Lost Boys. I feel like a lot of people know about the Lost Boys, but they're a little bit older than even me are really the people who were fans of the Lost Boys.
Dude, the Lost Boys was such a good movie.
Yeah,
it's such a good movie, and like Kiefer Sutherland's such a slimy, awesome vampire dick in that movie. Gosh, the two teens who run the comic book shop, who when they raid the chapel for holy water, fucking so good. Such a good film. The Coreys, that's right, it was the Coreys.
Yeah.
Oh, they were so, like, that film is so good on so many levels. Man, love it. You have what's his name? The dad, the grandpa from Gilmore Girls is like he's in it. He's the big bad. Oh, I love it.
Take your word
that movie is that movie is so freaking good, and I love that it's like, yo, what if we did a video game version of Redfall or of the Lost Boys, but we made it like a first person shooter, and it's gonna be sick as hell because it's Arcane.
Yeah,
and I'm looking at it right now. They've it is so cool. There is some wild character designs, and I'm digging it.
Yeah,
so much.
Gonna be a fun one. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a little before we started recording. Like, I finished Deathloop, like I broke the loop, and then I like put the game down and moved on to the next thing. I've not gone back since to see like the post game stuff. You mentioned like, oh, there are multiple endings and stuff. I haven't even looked at those. So that's definitely one, like it's interesting because like when I think of like my time with Dishonored, like those games were built around multiple playthroughs because I wanted to do like the high chaos run and the low chaos run, and there isn't that element in Deathloop.
Nope.
Like I can obviously still go.
It's all high chaos. It's all high chaos everywhere.
And so I can like that's that. I think that's like, I think I mentioned this when I talked about Deathloop on the show. Like that's one of the things that I miss in this game is like the more stealth, non-lethal options and like the array of tools and stuff that you got with that. Like I miss not having a stun dart or stun bombs that you can, use, and because you got to kill everybody. That's what you can do. For whatever reason, I just haven't been compelled or drawn back into the game, and I never did the Juliana stuff myself, and I don't know if I will. So we'll see. It's still absolutely phenomenal game for what it is, and yeah, I can't wait to see what Arcane does next. Even if it is going to be more of a spooky game because vampires and stuff, I'll try and push my way through that. I already like sat out on Prey because it's too spooky for me, but I know Blessings out there playing that one and loving it to death. So shout out to Arcane. Life is Strange Wavelengths is one of the other ones I brought to the table today. I basically actually finished playing this about an hour before we started recording. I talked a few weeks back on the show. I don't remember if you were on this one, Cam, but I really loved Life is Strange True Colors. It is my favorite Life is Strange games that I have played, which is basically all of them except Before the Storm. And it combined with this Wavelengths DLC like really make me want to go back and play Before the Storm, because both of those, Steph is a prominent character in Before the Storm as well as in these. So Wavelengths is basically a Steph-centric DLC. Who you meet in True Colors is running the record shop / also the DJ. Like she's the DJ for the local independent music station, rock station that is like has its studio in the indie record shop in this town. And Wavelengths is basically picks up a year before True Colors begins, and Alex Chen, your main character in the main game, comes to town. And so it starts basically like day one on the job, and you kind of like the whole game is very like confined to the record store. So you're either in the booth kind of like playing DJ and taking calls from people and reading ads and picking the music to play, or you step out of the booth and you go kind of walk around the record store doing chores and stuff like that. And the game takes place basically over 4 seasons. So there's like day one in the spring, then you pop back in a few months later in the summer, then a fall, and then a winter, and then there's kind of like a little epilogue that basically like leads right up to like where Steph meets Alex in the main game. And it's a cool little thing, backstory on Steph's character that kind of bridges the gap between where she was at before the storm and how she has dealt with the aftermath of Life is Strange 1, like depending on which ending you pick, because you're prompted basically at the beginning, like, did you save Arcadia Bay or did you not? And that's going to impact, whether or not, spoilers for Life is Strange 1, her friend Chloe died or the entire town was destroyed. And she will kind of like respond accordingly. If you're muted, Cam.
Yeah, that's interesting. Most people died in that storm, so
I mean, yeah.
Including like.
Well, so yeah, if you save Chloe, Arcadia Bay basically gets wiped out.
Yeah.
And so
hundreds of people die.
So either way, she's dealing with trauma in this game, and she kind of like has interactions with like a friend from the first story that like she kind of deals with and kind of copes with. And so yeah, it's just a cool extra look. And there's also because the whole thing is like confined to like you're just in this one location, you're not going out and doing anything, but you have. You had in the Life is Strange True Colors, like Alex has her phone. You can read through text messages. You can kind of like respond back to people. There's also like a Facebook kind of wall thing. In this, instead of like the Facebook wall, you have basically like a dating profile app that you can go on and create your profile as Steph, and you can like swipe left or swipe right. And if you match with people, you can kind of have conversations with them that will then like, maybe you date them, maybe you don't over the course of this different seasons. And that was cool. I had like a couple like cool little interesting interactions with some characters over the course of my 4 seasons there. So yeah, it's like, it's a great, if you love Steph like I did from the first game or from True Colors, it's great getting to spend more time with her as a character and getting to learn more about what makes her tick and kind of like her own insecurities, especially because I hadn't played Before the Storm. And so now I'm like, again, eager to go and play Before the Storm to get a sense of like who she was in that game compared to who she has become in these two. And yeah, it was just a fun, few hours. It like each season is basically like, like a 30 to 45 minute block. Oh, also when she's playing the DJ and taking calls from people, obviously, for those that know, she's very much into like tabletop stuff and D&D and whatnot. So she kind of takes on this persona. At least she did in my game. I don't know if this is something that would be like choice driven, but in mine, she takes on this persona as like a psychic, because one of the first callers she gets is this guy like wanting to buy CDs for his girlfriend, and as he goes through and like lists the songs, Steph is like, oh, she's about to break up with you, because those are all breakup songs. and so like when they call back and the girlfriend's like, how did you know he was going to how did you know I was going to break up with him before I broke up with him? and they're like, you must be psychic. And so she's like, all right, fine, I'm psychic. And so people start calling into the psychic DJ asking for like advice and stuff, and she rolls a d20 to figure out like, is she going to give them good advice or is she going to give them bad advice, kind of thing, or and kind of like how is that going to impact the stories that you tell. So that was another fun element to the character, because she's like reading ads. One of my favorite little elements was like they give you like a script with bullet points for the ads, and you can basically like stick to that script, or you can pick like a completely off the wall answer and just completely like mess with the scripts. And so then the ads you'll get like the next season are kind of reflecting like what you did. And in one of them in particular, so there's a cat in the True Colors main game, Valkyrie, who like there's kind of like a through line throughout the course of Wavelengths of like you befriending the cat and kind of like adopting the cat kind of thing. And for one of the sessions, the cat has just completely shredded up the ad copy, and so you only see like half of the bullet points and stuff like that, and so you kind of have to like wing it a little bit. And one of the ads I read for that example was like, so and so auto repair has been serving this community for, and that was where the thing cut off. So you get to pick like how long. And for in mine, Steph was just like, since the Stone Age, since back in those like Flintstones days where you like just had to run and drive the car with your feet or something like that. And then when they came back as a sponsor for the next session, they're like, we've been serving the community for 13 years. If anybody wants the real number, is what and I was like, I love that. I love that. Like they kind of like are in on the gag. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Had a really good time with it. It's I mean, like it's a no stakes kind of story to that regard, but it is like, again, the real crux of it is like kind of around Steph dealing with that trauma, because like one of the like the fall date is basically like the anniversary of either Chloe's death or like when Arcadia Bay like blew off the map, is basically like so she's very kind of dealing with that in the moment, and all the memories that are like everything you interact with in that scene has like memories come flooding back and stuff, and how she's going to try and deal with that trauma. So yeah, it was a great little story, and I mean, just even like in the final seat, like the final session is basically like New Year's Eve, and she's in the studio, and the call that she gets is from Gabe, the brother of your main character in True Colors, kind of saying like, "Hey, I need your advice, psychic Steph." And they're friends outside of this and have been and stuff. But he's like, I called in because I want your advice as the psychic kind of thing. And he talks about this idea of, I want to reach out to my sister, but it's been 7 years, and it's basically like setting up what is going to be the kickoff for True Colors effectively. And it's like, I got teared up like as they're talking through this, and kind of like knowing how that character, at least in my playthrough, is going to come in and change both these characters' lives as they're having this phone conversation, a couple months from now, basically. I was just getting like, oh man, like I love how connected and how invested I am in those characters and that story, that like even this like little prequel kind of thing, like knowing where it's gonna go starts getting me emotional back again to that game. So like,
jeez,
True Colors is just really good, really special kind of game, and Wavelengths I think is a very great DLC that kind of caps it off. And yeah, like as I continue to like sit with True Colors and those characters, like that game is just slowly and steadily just like rising my game of the year chart. I might end up sitting down and kind of playing it one more time before year end with like completely different decisions to see how wildly different I can make that. But yeah, it's one of those games that like I can't wait for like you or Logan or Frank to sit down and play it, and so we can just kind of like discuss it and discuss, what did you do in this situation, versus what I did in this situation, because it's one of those games that I think is really special in how you kind of flesh out that story, and then just also the shared experience of these characters is real fun. So I hope you guys sit down with it at some point. But yeah, Life is Strange Wavelengths, real special little DLC. And again, a fun little, endeavor. I mentioned, before we started recording, I did not expect this to have come out so quickly. It came out like on Friday, and I was like, oh wow, I was excited for it after beating the original game, but I thought that was going to be like, oh, it'll come out sometime in 2022, give them time to, finish developing it or whatever. And so when it was like, no, it's already out, I was like, oh, great. Cool. I'm going to hop in and spend some time with that then. So yeah, that is Life is Strange Wavelengths. Any other questions or anything before we move on to the last topic?
No.
All right. So yeah, we'll wrap up here with Heavensward. I finished Heavensward I finished the proper Heavensward stuff probably a few weeks ago, and then it just took me a little while to get through all the post-patch stuff. And I don't remember, I think it was probably before that, like whenever the spoilers for Heavensward, Horsefant stuff, like you and I on a whim, I reached out to you to be like, hey, do you want to help me like through this dungeon or whatever? Because I realized I was nearing the end of the Heavensward proper stuff, and we played through it, and then you were like, "Hey, turn on your cam," because you wanted to like watch my reaction to the cutscene that followed, and I'm the heartless bastard that I am, and did not have a emotionally devastating reaction to Horshaphant being slain. Although I did think pretty much after we finished up, I was like, in a world with magic and Phoenix Downs and stuff like that, where people are being resurrected left and right, it feels like somebody could have brought him back from the dead there, but whatever.
This world doesn't have Phoenix Downs though. The Phoenix Downs don't work that way.
It does. If you do a Gildebrand or the Hildebrand quest, or the quest that kicks off the Hildebrand, like I have a Phoenix Down that I can use to revive somebody. I have one, but yeah, like they do exist in the game. They're just a significantly more rare item, I'm sure. But still, like you can like, I mean, characters can be revived and stuff. So it's just one of those like, it's death is means nothing until it's like convenient for the plot, is one of those things that I think about kind of in moments like that. Like same with like, a big death in Borderlands 2 or whatever. It's like, well, that character died many a time in Borderlands 1 and just kept coming back. So it's like, why suddenly did they not come back here? Whatever. But yeah, so I did not have the reaction you were looking for in that. But then like a couple scenes later, or a couple quests later, like the Lady Iceheart like died, and I was like, oh, I'm actually bummed about that one. Like, but and that's like I felt more of a connection to that character, largely probably because I have more of a connection to Shiva than I did to Horshaphant. So yeah, I was like, oh, like this is the reaction that Cameron probably wanted from me. I mean, it still like wasn't a crazy, visceral reaction. But then as I went through and played through the Heavensward like stuff, I got I got real mad. I texted you like every time these things would happen. I got real mad when Nidhogg basically consumed Justinian, and then came down and like slayed one of like the dragons. I was like, what the boo? Damn it, Nidhogg / Justinian.
Didn't slay, wounded her.
Yeah, but I mean, like when I texted you, I did not know it was wounded. Like it was like, oh, that definitely looked like it killed her. So I thought it had at the time. So yeah, you got a couple of those texts from me as I've continued to progress through. Like, damn it, so and so, damn it, so and so. But yeah, I finally finished that. I love I mean, as I kind of texted with you, like I was surprised that some of that stuff like wrapped up as quickly as it did. But then I was like, oh, but I guess, yeah, they're probably going to spend the next couple patches to set up where Stormblood's going to go. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did.
Yep.
So now that I'm diving into Stormblood, like I enjoyed the Ida reveal at the end of the patches there, of like, hey, I'm not actually Ida. And also rest in peace, Papalymo. Right. Yeah. I was like, oh, bummer to see that guy. And then also like Minfilia is kind of also gone now. So I was like, oh, like all of these signs that I like enjoyed and felt connected with from the first game. Like I was bummed that I spent all of the Heavensward stuff like not really seeking them out. And then eventually you finally like get Y'shtola and Thancred and stuff. And Ida and Papalymo. And then like immediately you lose Papalymo again. I'm like, and Minfilia, you just never get back. It's like, oh, she's gone and she's now become like one with Hydaelyn or whatever, like whatever's going on there. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, oh, because I liked them. And my overall thoughts on like Heavensward were, well, I appreciate that story. I also felt like I didn't like this notion of like, well, I've just kind of like left all those people that I spent the first 50 hours of the game helping out, so much so that like even when we do like a tournament between Ishgard and like the rest of Eorzea, I'm somehow fighting on Ishgard's side. I was like betrayal. I'm a storm I'm a storm lady. I should be fighting with the with Limsa and Lamince's crew. What the hell, guys? But whatever, had a good time with it. I think I mentioned on previous thing, like I picked up the Final Fantasy 15 car from that like little special event that was going on. That was fun.
Yep.
I in one of these quests, I think it was probably one of the patch things, I got like the Red Baron as a Magitech thing, like basically a red Magitech thing, and I was like, I want that. How do I get that? And I found out, oh, you buy that, and I was like, well, I'm buying that. so I bought myself a new mount, just continuing to have a lot of fun. I'm interested now as like diving into the Stormblood stuff, going into Alamiga, and I'm just now making the journey to, like, I'm on the boat to Doma now.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah.
And I remember, like, I realized I had mentioned way back in like my base game stuff, I like made mention of like, oh, I think I'm going to Doma next or something like that, and you were like, that's weird. And I'm only now realizing, like, because that was like when Yugiri was like coming across the sea or whatever.
Yep.
So I thought like the direction was going to be like, oh, go to Doma, and so now I'm going to Doma, and I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna get to see what that's actually like.
First you'll hit Kugane, which is the hub city for Stormblood.
Yeah, that is the next. I will get to Kugane after I do the dungeon on the quest that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
It's the Siren Song something dungeon or something, yeah.
Yeah, the Kugane is the midpoint between Alamigo and Doma.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually listening to a podcast recently when they were like, why? So yeah, actually I won't get into that because there's spoilers and attach that to what you're going to be playing through later. But there's another city that's introduced that is not a place that's going to be the like a big hub city, and a lot of people thought it should have been, especially since it's used more in the post Stormblood stuff than others. But it's very, like, I love Kugane, but it's also very much a lot of effort was put into designing it. And there's other areas, but it's important to note. So I'm going to ask you this. Do you remember what Yugiri told you when she first showed up in Eorzea?
I remember she was a refugee, but other than that, no.
So it's good that I brought this up, actually, because this is going to be an important refresher for you. So when Yugiri showed up, she tells you that after you beat Ultima Weapon, it inspired a lot of people, and Doma, specifically in Ockard, there was a rebellion. Basically, they were under Garlean rule, and they rebelled. And what ended up happening is the rebellion that was put down afterwards was so brutal that they razed the ground. So the Doma you're going to, is a Doma in recovery and under subjugation, very harsh subjugation. So, I'm very excited for you to go there and encounter that. But I kind of expected Doma to be more like Kugane, and it's not, because everything was razed to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And you've met the guy who did raise it, I believe.
Oh, he was the big guy that showed up on the island. Was that guy? Or no? Or you're saying was it Xenos?
Xenos, yeah.
Xenos, yeah. Yeah, he definitely seems like the big bad. And so, like, when he handed me my ass in, a few missions ago or whatever, and they were like, how are we gonna do this? Let's get Doma to join in this fight. So these guys have to fight a war on two sides. I was like, oh, I remember Cameron mentioning something about that kind of that mentality. So, yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I like Lise as a character. The former Ida. So I'm interested in kind of seeing her continue to grow and deal with this, like, her grappling with like this homeland that she doesn't even really feel like she belongs to anymore because she's been away from so long.
Well, she's been away from her pretty much her entire life.
Yeah.
She was a toddler when Alamigo fell. Like, Alamigo, we've heard for such a long time Rabon and even Ilberd talk about like the home that they lost, and like Alamigo's an interesting place because it's a hard place. It's a place that is not very like it's not soft in any way.
Yeah.
The further when you go back to Alamigo from Doma, like you're gonna go through some other areas and it's gonna be like, why would people live here?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why people lived there is because during the fifth umbral calamity, where the world was flooded, Alamigo's high mountaintops were some of the only hospitable places where people could live.
Mm-hmm.
And so it established, so it was born from a harsh time.
Yeah.
And it has continued to be a harsh land for a harsh people. So much so that like they rebelled against their own crown, their own king, which was a machination of Garlean design, because after they rebelled against their king, the Garleans invaded, and because they were so devastated by their civil war, they couldn't put up a proper defense. And so Alamigo, a crown jewel of Eorzea and the Eorzean alliance, was destroyed. And it's I love there's a lot about Stormblood that I love, but the stuff that's kind of like not super awesome about it is, it doesn't have the emotional heights that I think Heavensward does.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is because it is split on two different fronts. Like there are two different cast of characters. You're going to be spending so much time in Doma that by the time you go back, you're like, oh yeah, I remember these Alamigan people.
Yeah. And
you've forgotten, the theme of Stormblood, the theme is literally the theme of Alamigo. Which is it's a song about remembering that fallen brothers and this very militant theme that Stormblood is about. And it's I'm very curious as to why they decided to also bring Ockard and Doma back into play for this. If it was just to give a further emphasis on samurai, because there's also about Xenos. Xenos picked up and basically classed himself as a samurai with his big, ugly, rotating 3-sword machine.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love that aspect of it. I'm one of the people out there that I actually really love Xenos as a character. Some people don't like him. They were after Nidhogg and kind of big evil, sadistic, the greatest prey of all is man, or the greatest game, to hunt is mankind. And so your fellow man, very much that emphasis on the hunt and this sadistic kind of thing. But he also has a dump truck of an ass. He's the big baddie with the big ass. You called him a big baddie earlier, and I call him the big baddie with the big ass.
It feels like big baddie with a big booty would be a better way to go, but
that's
okay.
Good. That's way better. No, that's way better. Big baddie with the big booty. Ooh. Xenos has the dump truck of an ass, and it is fantastic. I think Xenos is very much. A lot of people are like, oh, they're just trying to make him Sephiroth. I think he's a great he's a great classic Final Fantasy villain in my opinion, which is a great parallel from but that's for a lot of other people also. They like the kind of ambiguity of Nidhogg. Yeah, Nidhogg is doing something awful, and that's terrible. But he also is trying to avenge his mate, his partner.
Yeah.
With this war.
Was Nidhogg wasn't. I mean, Nidhogg wasn't the one who was. Nidhogg is what Nidhogg was basically the Wrath side of the Hraesvelgr, because it was Hraesvelgr and Shiva they were. So
Hraesvelgr and Shiva were lovers, yes, and that whole plot line is there. Ratatoska, I don't remember how to say her name, but she's the dragon that Theoden killed.
Oh, okay. Not Theoden, Thordan. Whatever.
Thordan, yeah, thank you. Thordan.
I was like, Theoden's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings. Thordan killed her.
Okay.
And he and his knights consumed her eyes and her flesh.
Gotcha.
In order to become as powerful as they were. And in Nidhogg's rage at feeling the death of his mate, he attacks Thordan and his men, which leads to the events of the Dragon Song War. But Nidhogg was right to like take this to war.
Yeah.
And Nidhogg, like,
maybe not for 1,000 years, but yes.
Yeah, but it's also like for a dragon, 1,000 years is not as long as it is for people. And so it's like it's a whole thing of like Nidhogg was like, you can't trust the humans. They're little monstrous animals. Don't trust them. And then he was proven right.
Yeah.
Which is just wild. But it's a big part of that. I loved so like the kind of like learning the truth of the Dragon Song War, the whole Thoradin aspect of it. Like there's a whole lot that happens in Heavensward that I think is like there are such high heights of these characters, and you don't really get all of that or even a lot of that in Stormblood, but Stormblood is still like a solid expansion. It has a great story.
Yeah, I mean, I can easily see that like the political religious intrigue of the underlying plot of Heavensward is going to be probably very different than like the military fight and might in Stormblood. So I can appreciate that, like you'd be drawn to the one more than the other, and I ultimately may be as well. Who knows? I will report back once I have continued to progress through the Stormblood stuff. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to. Oh, I've done all the Black Mage quests in Stormblood, because I'm level 70 something now. I think either 70 or 71. So
nice.
I've already hit the Stormblood max, and went through and did all the Black Mage quests. I was a little bummed because like for the job quest this time around, like I didn't get. Like I just got like experience and some gold for each of the quests kind of leading up to the final one. Like I wasn't getting new abilities each time until like the level 70 quest finally gave me new abilities and a whole bunch of new gear. So now I'm decked out for what I'm probably going to be wearing for most of the Stormblood campaign, I imagine. And I was like, oh, and I had just finished getting like some of the 200 and level 270 gear or something like that from the Allegan Poetics or whatever. But whatever. I got sexy new Black Mage gear, and I'm running around with that. So, continuing to enjoy it. I don't think there's a ton of other things that are coming out this month.
The Stormblood class gear for a Black Mage is awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to be, largely just playing probably this for the bulk of October and November here. So I should be able to get through Stormblood and then Shadowbringers still in the lead up to Endwalker end of next month. Because I think the only other things I'm like really considering playing are going to be just like miscellaneous. Maybe I'll hop in and try and catch up on a game like a Chicory or something like that that I missed earlier in the year, but. Other than that, yeah, there's just not. We're back into another lull for me at least, because I don't care about like Back 4 Blood coming out, or I think like the next game I'm like Far Cry. I have zero interest in hopping into Far Cry 6. So I think maybe the next game, the next new release for me is going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy, and even that's like a maybe I'll check it out when it comes out, or maybe I'll let that one sit for a little while, depending on the reviews and stuff. So yeah, gonna continue enjoying Final Fantasy 14 on that MMO front. We start the show off with an MMO and we wrap it up with an MMO.
There you go.
If you'd asked me that 2 years ago, I would have never thought that was going to be the case.
That's true.
But yeah, that is gonna do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me here to talk about these handful of games. Oh, also, neither of us saw Venom: Let There Be Carnage because fuck that movie. Frank did see it though.
It's hard. Frank saw it, but that's part of the problem. That movie is making over $90 million.
Yeah, I hate that.
In the post-pandemic box office, and it's like, fuck, why?
God damn it! Yeah.
Why? That like the first one was not good. People should not have liked it. People should not have paid so much money to see it. But like honestly, the answer came to me. I was like, why did people see it? It's like, oh, that's right. I forgot. I totally forgot the lesson I learned from the first movie, which was people be horny for Venom. So
yep, apparently. And now you got a red Venom too.
Gross. Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
I want to give a quick shout out to Scott White over at Irrational Passions.
Mm-hmm.
Professor RPG, as it were. He just got married.
Mm-hmm.
Saw the photo on Twitter and social media, and he's been engaged for a while. Things have been tough, especially after like the whole DualShockers debacle. So I'm super happy for him, super proud of him for, making this happen, getting married, to the love of his life, and just wishing the two of them the absolute best.
Yeah, absolute shout out to Scott. Yeah, they got married on Friday. He and I actually were talking like early September, mid-September maybe, about me going back on RPG University for another Final Fantasy coming up here soon. And he was like, "Can you do this week?" And I was like, "I'm not going to be ready by then." He's like, "Okay, well, then we'll do it sometime in October because I've got my wedding coming up and I'm going to I'm stopping, planning recording for a little while." I was like, "Absolutely, sounds good." So yeah, if we pick that up here, I'll potentially be on a RPG University sometime here, maybe the next month or two. So stay tuned for that. But yes, shout out to our friend Scott White over at Irrational Passions and the RPG University podcast. Professor RPG, indeed. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I just want to give a shout out to That D Plus show this month. We're doing Halloween stuff all month long. We kicked that off on Friday with Marvel's What If, specifically looking at the zombies episode to kind of kick off Halloween month. And then we will be doing like a handful of other things. This week's episode is going to be Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales, little 45-minute Lego Star Wars special that they put up, Halloween themed. Then we've got Muppet Haunted Mansion the following week, a Treehouse of Horrors medley of episodes as the penultimate episode for the month, and then we will wrap up on, I believe, October 29th with Halloween Town 2, following up on me and Logan did Halloween Town last year. So kind of make that an annual tradition for as long as there are Halloween Town movies, and as long as we're doing this podcast. So go check those out, That D Plus show on podcast services, like whatever you're listening to this show on. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with friends, and maybe even consider supporting us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron of $1 or more gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of the That Nerdy Site show. This month's episode, as we touched on at the top, is me and Jazz Foster sitting down talking about some of our favorite Halloween memories. But if you can't support us over on Patreon, that'll go up live for everybody at the end of October. Thank you again for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.